Hey guys, Dean here. Today we're going to be talking about how you can actually start building your credit score for beginners and maintaining an actual good score and level. Now, it's important to first mention that building up your credit score and also maintaining it takes a long time to avoid most of the common mistakes and pitfalls with doing that. Now, the first priority before you even get started with this is to assess your actual financial habits. Are you actually practicing healthy financial habits before you actually acquire a credit card? If you're doing really foolish things or you're not very good at managing your money in general, it's not a very good idea to get started with this process. So I've made a note of a few different things which will probably make you ineligible to actually get started. So let's move on to those. So first of all, if you have no emergency fund saved up whatsoever, if you're struggling with living beyond your means, if you don't have any kind of income or at least a consistent or semi-consistent income, if you have no budget or budgeting skills, or if you just generally have very poor spending habits, then you need to first look over these 5 or 6 different pointers and actually start correcting those parts of your life which are actually lacking. Because if you're generally not very good with money management, then you're not going to be able to maintain any kind of good credit score. Now, when getting started, cash flow should not be any kind of problem for you. So you need to get that out of the way. You need to figure out how you can get a consistent income, how you can make a decent level of money, or at least a level of money where you're not going to be running into any problems. If you're in any kind of bad situation or your income is seeing any kind of inconsistency right now, then don't expect to either first acquire or then maintain a good credit score. Now, if you actually want to start being able to earn some good money and you're at the point where you haven't yet done that, or if you don't really have any clue as to how you can start budgeting and setting out a financial plan, including a budget, then you can check out my 2 videos on these things. I have a video on how you can start budgeting and how budgeting works and how you can do it with the whole structure and the planning process. And then I have a lot of different business videos where you can start home businesses from home or do freelance work as well. So if you want to learn how to make money and how to start a business online, there's some great resources on this channel to learn how to start doing that and then how to start managing your money on top of it. So I recommend to click those videos first and become financially literate in those areas before you begin. Now, for some of the best loans and some of the prime rate loans out there, you're only going to really need a credit score of around 740 and above. So anything above that, that's kind of where you're starting to slowly get into the territory of just trying to keep high credit score or trying to keep increasing your credit score just for hobby purposes or just to have a crazy figure, right? Because anything above this figure, you're not really going to need. So the first step is to, of course, obtain a type of credit card. So what credit card should we be obtaining? Well, if you don't actually have any kind of credit score right now or credit history, then you can actually apply for what's called a secure credit card. This basically requires a form of deposit when you apply for it, which will act as collateral for your credit limit on the card. Now, when picking a credit card, what's really important is you need to find one that will actually send reports to the major credit bureaus. So your credit score and your credit report, they will share with or send to the major bureaus, because this is where you're going to obviously send a request to view your credit. Also, it's important to note that you don't need to pay any kind of subscription or any kind of bogus fees or mini payments to actually get a good credit score. So I'd recommend looking for a card where you don't actually have any kind of annual fee or recurring membership costs to actually use the card. Now, as for actual money habits when using the card and utilizing it, I recommend only actually use your card for planned expenses. So things that you already have set in your mind ahead of time that you're going to need to pay off, such as like a monthly subscription, for an example. These are very easy to actually purchase and pay with a credit card with, and it also allows you to stay on top of things. Now, just because you acquired a credit card, it's important to mention that you shouldn't actually change your financial habits to what they usually are. For an example, if you don't spend a lot of money or you don't waste money typically day to day, there's no point spending any extra money just because you've got a card and you want to use it. Because remember, rewards are actually really nice, but overspending is just stupid in general, and it's not smart. Okay, we want to start off this journey quite smart. You also want to make sure that every single time that there's a balance that needs to be paid on your card, your credit balance is paid in full and by or before the actual required date that you need to pay it by. Always make sure to stay on top of or pay it before the actual due date which is requested of you. Now, one interesting thing that you can actually use is the fact that you can actually consider becoming an authorized user on someone's card. Now, this can be quite risky for the person putting you on their card or on their credit, so it's important to do this with someone you trust and someone who is also very good with managing money. So for an example, this could be with a family member or it could be a spouse. You could be attached to your wife's credit, for an example, someone who's very close with you that you trust and also that you kind of know their behaviors of. It's a very common story that sometimes people get attached to their spouse's credit when their spouse is actually very terrible at actually maintaining a good credit score, and it actually hurts them in the long run and their credit. So always make sure to analyze that the person that you're obviously becoming an authorized user with is actually very good at spending money and handling money, and make sure they actually have a solid history themselves of managing their card and making payments on time. Because if you have these things in place and you become an authorized user with them, it actually allows you to basically bolster your credit score much quicker. You are basically having their personal credit copied to your report, and it's kind of like fast tracking you through the process, right? So this can be a really good thing to leverage, especially for first time users. So one tip is to keep your credit utilization fairly low. So what is your credit utilization? Perhaps you don't know what the credit utilization is. You're asking me, Dean, what is credit utilization? Well, this is basically the amount of credit that you use in comparison to your actual credit limit. And the utilization itself usually takes up around 30% of your score. So you really need to make sure that you keep it below 30% to actually have and maintain that good score. Also, paying your bills on time is extremely important, guys, okay? Because your payment history of all of your receipts and payments that you've made on time, or in worst cases haven't made on time, is going to make up for 35% of your credit score. This basically means that it's unacceptable to have any kind of late payments, because if you make any kind of late payments, they're going to stay on your credit report for up to a total of 7 years, which is pretty ridiculous. Then we also want to make sure that we keep our credit debt extremely low. And a better way of saying this is to keep our debt burden low. So FICO, F-I-C-O, which is basically the credit reporting system, will actually reward consumers for paying off their debt, aka paying down debt, and keeping their debt levels low. So that's one thing to actually take into consideration, okay? So you're basically rewarded for your performance with how you handle debt. Then you also want to make sure, by staying on top of things, you check your credit report fairly regularly. You can actually view your credit report from each of the major bureaus every single year. There's 3 of these in America, and you're basically going to do this to take advantage of looking for errors in your report to make sure nothing's actually wrong and there's no mistakes that have been made. And anything that you find which seems like an inconsistency, you can actually dispute that as being inaccurate. So that's why you want to keep on top of things by looking at it yourself. But you do have to take into consideration that every single creditor will actually report things differently, and they'll also have a range of different policies too. Then an interesting sentiment, which not everyone would have actually admittedly probably thought of, is to actually keep open your old accounts. So you're probably wondering, why should I actually keep open these old accounts which I no longer use, or just have the want to actually close? It seems kind of counterintuitive, right? Well, the reason you actually want to keep open these old accounts from before is because the history of your credit makes up for 15% of your total score, and keeping open these old accounts is basically going to help with this, and it's going to help with this part of your score. So there's kind of an incentive for you to actually do so. The next one is limit your credit inquiries. So this is another one which seemingly doesn't really make any sense from the get-go, right? Because it seems like I'm basically going against my own point, because I just told you to regularly check up on your credit score, but that's something which you're usually going to do annually. Every time that you actually apply for credit, it results in a hard inquiry on your report, okay? So that's going to have a negative impact in the long run on you, and it's going to stay there for a duration of up to 2 years. So you really need to try and keep a limit or a damper on applications for this purpose alone. And also, as with the point I made before about trying to keep open your old accounts, you want to actually have a level of consistency though as well. So you want to try to avoid regularly opening new accounts and regularly closing accounts, which kind of does also bolster the previous point, because this is basically sending a red flag out to lenders, and because of this, it's going to negatively impact your score, because they're wondering, why is this person constantly making new accounts and opening and closing them? They're going to wonder, are you involved in some kind of money laundering or some kind of shady activity? And they're going to want to steer away to the other direction from you. So you want to make sure you're having consistency with your accounts so you don't flag up on the system and look like you're a shady character who's doing something strange. And then the last general point which I have for you is to try and just avoid financial mistakes and common pitfalls that people do, and not all of the ones just on this video, but just generally having common sense with this regard. So I'll give you a couple of examples, or maybe 2 or 3 examples of these. These could be things like foreclosures, bankruptcy, and also debt collections. These are 3 big things, or 3 big mistakes that you want to avoid that will probably have the largest impact impact out of everything on your actual credit score. And these are things which have an absolutely severe impact on it. And because they leave such a big impact on it, they're actually going to stay on your credit score basically as a stain for up to 7 to 10 years. So it's going to be hard to actually erase these things happening, okay? So for this reason alone, these need to be avoided at all costs, because otherwise it's going to stop you from doing certain things or getting to the places you want to be for that duration of time, or until you actually fix those. So it's best just to avoid those if it's possible to do so, if you haven't already made those mistakes, right? So I hope some of these tips on how to get a good credit score and maintain it have helped you. I'd recommend, since this isn't strictly legal financial advice, that you can actually consult with a financial advisor to check over some of these points before you put them into practice and do your own research and due diligence. If you do have any questions in the comments section below, I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. And if anything was wrong in this video, or if you have any corrections or better advice, also share that down there too. Make sure to like the channel and subscribe if you want to improve your financial literacy and also get better at business and make a lot of money online, because this is what this channel is all about, and I'm sharing some great value every single week which you're not going to be able to find anywhere else on YouTube. See you soon.